Great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever this conversation finds you. I am Travis Gray. This is Gray Transforms. We are blessed to be transforming with another great guest, Jeff Patterson. Jeff has been involved in martial arts for nearly 40 years. He is the founder of Northwest Fighting Arts and Portland Tai Chi Academy. He has an online program and a published book, both called The Yielding Warrior. I will leave a link in the description for a free copy to The Yielding Warrior. The subtitle is Discovering the Secret Path to Unleashing Your True Potential. Jeff, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm truly honored to have you here. I have been such a fan of martial arts for so long. I grew up in high school. I did a lot of wrestling and then I'm just so fascinated by martial arts and the dance and just all these things that the only sport I watch is mixed martial arts. So I really enjoy a lot of these concepts and how it's such a spiritually pragmatic avenue for people to bring into their actual lives. So it's really amazing to have you here and to have the opportunity to speak with you. How did your life with the martial arts begin?
Well, I started the external arts at a fairly young age, and my segue path into the meditative arts was a bit of a roundabout path. I used to be really into Western boxing, and I just love the challenge of it and the intensity and just everything about the art. It was really fascinating to me, and so I used to train 5, 6 days a week. I used to go down to a boxing club that was just a few blocks here from my academy in Portland, and this was back, when I was 19, 20 years old, so it's been a bit. And at a boxing gym, if you're not familiar with how it works, usually instead of in a classroom environment, most of the coaches have maybe a handful of fighters that they work with independently. And one of the coaches that was at this gym at the time was a very well-known coach, actually created national and world champion level fighters. And I really wanted to get to spend some time with him and have him help me with my boxing. And so for about 3 or 4 months, I'd follow him around and tried to show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there with his fighters and let him see how hard I was working and how disciplined I was. And it took about 3 or 4 months, and he finally started giving me a little bit of information and showing me a few things here and there. And then he started spending a little bit more time with me. And it was only about maybe 2 to 3 weeks into this transition when he said something to me that changed my life forever. And he told me that, if you really want to be good at Western boxing, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. And at the time, I'm this young kid who doesn't know much of anything, thinking that Tai Chi is for old people in the park, and how's that going to help me be a better boxer? And so I took on the practice, and it's changed my life in so many positive ways, as well as been a huge influence on my students here at the academy. I've been running this academy for 30 years, and I've had hundreds of people positively influenced by the meditative arts, which is why I've been so passionate and putting together this book and this online program is to teach this message and get this out there to people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Isn't it funny how Tai Chi is, we always think of like Asian ladies in the park and stuff like that. For people that don't know, what is Tai Chi? What makes it different from other martial arts? Maybe what is Qigong as well?
Yeah, so that's a pretty big question. In the old days, people practiced Tai Chi for the martial side of the training, and they did it as a martial art. What they found was when Buddha Dhammo came over from India, he saw a lot of the monks, and they were all beat up and broken because they weren't they were just doing this hard style martial art. And so he incorporated the meditative elements of the art and the energetic principles and the health side of the practice. And since then, people have seen so many benefits of the practice from a health perspective. Now, if you were to, pull together 1,000 Tai Chi Qigong schools around the country, I bet there's less than 50 that have any kind of real depth of knowledge in the martial side of the training. Most everybody does it for the health side. The Qigong is a little bit of a more diverse topic in that there's 5 different directions of the Qigong. There's the what I call the martial or athletic side of the Qigong. There's the medical side, the philosophical side, the therapeutic side, and then the meditative or spiritual side. And you can follow any one of those paths or a couple of those paths, but it is a very deep practice and something, I've been studying for a long time, and I'm still just a student learning all the time. It's not something that you're going to master after a year or two. And that's one of the things that keeps it fun and exciting as a practitioner as well as a teacher.
Yeah, that is super fascinating. This idea that you could deepen your maybe your qigong practice, or you can deepen any of these martial arts to look at the like the philosophical meanings behind these movements, and maybe what is being revealed to you through certain movements, maybe certain limitations in a given form or something like that. So that is really interesting. The book, The Yielding Warrior, the subtitle is Discovering the Secret Path to Unleashing Your True Potential. I'm curious, what does that mean to you? What is a person's true potential?
Well, I think that a lot of times we go through life getting into a rhythm or habits that make things easy for us. And we miss out on a lot of things that can open us up to new possibilities. And the meditative arts teaches us how to be more in tune with our body, with our breath, with our mind, with our energetic expressions and our spirit, and helps us to discover new things. Like if you remember when you're a kid, you go out and you're looking at all the new things around and you're so excited to do this and that and the other, and everything is always new and like you're an explorer, right? Well, when we get older, a lot of that goes away. But developing a meditative practice kind of brings some of that inspiration back, and we can utilize that in our careers and our relationships and our athletics and our own personal development in a lot of different areas. And that's why so many people today are into the meditative arts. You look at professional athletes, performers, high level executives are all turning to the meditative arts because they see such a deep value in the practice.
100%. I have a lot of practitioners, facilitators, therapists that are helping big companies have a community of meditation practice. I've had the opportunity to lead meditation groups for organizations like Zoom and things like this. That it is being built into business. I teach psychology courses, positive psychology, and a course called Personality and Motivation for MBA students. So the university has a really unique perspective and approach to masters of business administration, and utilizing meditation techniques in the classroom, and helping a student gain some understanding of all of those benefits. So am I right in understanding what you're saying is that your true potential can be very multifaceted, and it could be just maybe an actualization of the talents and skills in a variety of areas, and there's maybe many paths to doing that, and meditation, these meditative arts, some of the martial arts as well, can open up the avenues to those things.
Yes. So I think that by exploring internally and looking inside ourselves, we start to not only see things deeper in ourselves, but outside of ourselves as well. And, I've there's few things in life that make us look internally, and a lot of other things that do a little bit of that are also have an external element. So I believe that, to be a good musician, you've got to tap into the soul and look internally, right? But at the same time, when you're playing music, you're also doing an external act. You're trying to think about where your fingers go, and you're whatever, if you're playing the guitar or whatever it is that you're doing. Whereas in meditation, we're turning internal and we're trying to find that music inside the body. So we're not thinking about anything outside the body, and that helps us to find that deeper level of connection. Whereas when we have that, we can use that to express in our physical activities that we're doing, in our energetic expressions, in our overall spirit. However we bring that out is a very valuable benefit of the practice.
I really appreciate the analogy of a musician. The Qigong does just this idea that a physical practice and relating to my energetic expression in this physical way while in the process of the movements and the practice of a set of movements of some sort. There's something about connecting with the unmaterialistic or the unexpressed and the expressed in the material world in a similar way as a musician. Like you said, that like the musician has to hit the proper strings and chords and things like this, but at the same time there's an inner relationship to their energetic expression so that it matches the tone and message of the art and the creative act that they're aiming to put out into the world. I just mentioned that I appreciate the analogy of a musician and the practice of qigong or these martial arts and this sort of like movement meditation in the qigong practice. There's a movement and there is a meditative experience of looking inward, of turning inward into what is the energetic expression involved there. And with a musician, like you said, the strings that they have to be on the strings or the keys, and that expression is dipping. It's dipping into two places. It's dipping into like an unexpressed or an unmaterialistic, like an opposite of materialism, a spiritual element. It could be described as, and that's that maybe an energetic, expressive quality, and utilizing that to match the tone and the message of what they are aiming to express in a material way through the chords and the playing of the instrument.
Yeah, so I think meditation and martial arts do have a lot of those connections with music and with some other art forms.
Yeah.
The thing that kind of sets them apart is when you're doing a strictly a meditative practice, it's helping us to, say for example, if I go to grab a glass of water, it's a simple mechanical movement. I've done it a million times, right? But most people think I extend my arm, I bring the glass back, I pick it up to my mouth. Well, when I do that, there's literally thousands of things going on. I'm shifting the weight, I'm transitioning from one leg to the other maybe a little bit. I'm turning my core, my abdomen might be tightened up a little bit. All of the little muscles in my forearm are working in harmony and together to pick up and squeeze my fingers. And, if I was to do that simple movement, even trying to do it the same 1,000 times over, I could never do it exactly the same. And the thing about turning your focus inward is we start to look at all of these little things that are going on inside of ourselves. And when we can see those at a higher level, which most people never recognize even half of them, and when we start to see those things at a little bit of a deeper focus, this is where, like, all of the kind of gold comes out in the practice. Is like you start to notice things at a very detailed level, not only in yourself, but in other people. And when you do this, it's a lot easier to lead conversations, lead energetic interactions, lead physical activity in a positive direction or a desired direction with the least amount of resistance. And that's kind of the idea behind yielding.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful expression of being fully mindful, present in the movement, and really noticing all the little adjustments. It reminded me that that example reminds me of like Buddhist arts, but there's a set of like a real ascetic Buddhist will have really defined practices for every little aspect of life. The way that they wash their hands to the ways that everything is very ritualistic. And in the book, you spoke about the value and importance of ritual. What kind of rituals do you bring into your life? Of course, the qigong and the tai chi and the martial arts practice. Are there ways that what are the ways that you approach these forms of martial arts in a ritualistic way?
So, with any meditative practice, I break it down into ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. Ritual practices can be things like a sitting meditation, a Qigong set, a Tai Chi routine, a standing meditation, breathing exercises, yoga postures. There's a lot of different meditative ritual practices that we can do. And for anybody thinking to pick up a meditative practice, I highly recommend at least 20 minutes a day incorporating a ritual practice that you can do consistently as your foundation. And if you have that and you do that over and over again, you're going to start deepening your awareness and get to deeper levels of a meditative practice. Then we have active practices, and these can be things like setting time aside every hour, every 90 minutes to maybe even as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some spinal rotations or doing an energetic movement practice, even if it's only for, a minute. The more that we can bring our awareness back in and use these active practices, and they can be done, when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store, and we start incorporating these into our day-to-day lives, now our meditative practice is becoming more of a way of life and less of a hobby that we do once in a while. And then on the next one would be the philosophical practices, and those could be things that we use in a ritual practice or an active practice. And we'll do things like the memorization of sayings that help us move towards a positive direction, or maybe a gratitude practice, or maybe a mantra practice where we're repeating something to try to stimulate some different energy centers in the body. I mean, there's different ways that we can use this. And so as we're building a meditative practice around our lifestyle, we'll incorporate things from all three of these areas to get different outcomes. We mentioned earlier about the 5 different directions of Qigong. Your focus might be athletic Qigong, somebody else might be spiritual. And so you would do different practices to get different things on the other side. And I've seen so many people where they get confused with the meditative arts, saying that, I tried this meditation, it just doesn't work for me. Well, there's one of 1,000 things that you tried. There, I guarantee you, there's something that can work for everybody. And part of it is the misconception, and this, especially if you're a new practitioner, I think this is really important to understand, is that everybody thinks, or a lot of people that are new to the practice think, that if they can't quiet their mind, they're not being successful with meditation. And that's not what it's meant to be. It's not about getting to nirvana and having a silent mind. The idea of meditation is learning the skill sets and using these practices, whether it's a sitting practice, a standing practice, a movement practice, so that every time your mind gets distracted, you use the breath, you use the posture, you use the movement, whatever it is, to bring yourself back to focus. So if you have a ritual practice that, say, lasts 20 minutes, and you lose focus 50 times during that practice, but you also get 50 repetitions of coming back to center and bringing yourself back to that focus, and you do that every day, a year goes by, 5 years goes by, think about how powerful and how strong you're going to be with dealing with those distractions and bringing them back to focus. And that's what meditation's about. Don't feel like you're not being successful just because you can't quiet the mind. And so that's a real important concept to understand with the practice.
Right. That reminds me of like people feeling like, if I go into the weight room and I could not, if I couldn't bench 200 pounds, well, then I should give up and I'm just not good
Right.
at this, or I just can't do this. But it's an exercise, it's a muscle, it's built on. I like to use the word familiarization. So you are familiarizing yourself with this skill set or this state of mind. You're familiarizing yourself. Often a new practitioner is familiarizing themselves with the state of their busy mind, and they don't, maybe they're not turning inward to notice that often in their lives. And so this is an opportunity to see, oh wow, my mind is actually a lot busier than I realize it, and I can see why this might be perturbing my effectiveness in a certain context, or certain areas of my life are not going well because my mind is so busy. I can't stay on track with this. Well, your practice in the meditation, the bringing it back to the practice, all of that over years time, like you're saying, is definitely going to, it's just inevitably going to help you build the skill of being able to do that in other areas of your life. So it is like we were speaking about before. It is opening many doorways, many pathways to your true potential in so many ways. So it's really great. So what is this this concept of yielding? I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about what is yielding. I had a friend of mine that was on the podcast before. He had spoke about open awareness. His name is Javon Dangley. He spoke about open awareness and judo mind, and it seemed similar. And then there's a famous psychologist, Carl Rogers. Are you familiar with this psychologist, Carl
I
Rogers?
do not know him, no.
No. Carl Rogers is a humanistic psychologist, and he wrote a lot about the good life, and his idea of an optimal human being is a fully functioning person. And a fully functioning person had certain qualities, the qualities of openness to experience, qualities of living more fully in every moment of your life, and another one was a trust of the organism. So a less of a need for defense mechanisms, because you trust that anything that comes your way, you're going to be able to respond effectively in whatever moment that happens. And a lot of this sounds like, an expert martial artist is able to live in their lives in that way. Openness to everything that is happening in the context that it is happening, and fully present in the moment. My awareness is open. What is yielding? Did you come up with this term, or is this is something that you were taught and took it or ran with?
Yielding has been used in martial arts for generations and way before my time. However, I've never heard anybody talk about the three directions of yielding like I explained it in the book. And I found this through my practice, and I'm sure people have used these principles before, but I have never read or heard anything about anybody talking about this in any way. And I break down yielding into three different directions. So we have the physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's the idea of I push you, you push me. Whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us seeing who the bigger meathead is, you push me and I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort, and I don't have to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. And I can oftentimes get to the outcome that I want to see without having to resist you. Now, in martial arts, it's easy to see how this is very effective because you're not always going to come up against somebody who's weaker than you. So you have to learn and know how to deal with somebody who's overpowering you. Now, it's also used in sports, football, basketball, baseball. I mean, anywhere you do anything physical, the idea of physical yielding can come into play. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You have to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, you'll experience some of the benefits of this from day one, but it really takes years and years to get to a high level of physical yielding, especially if somebody's throwing a punch at you. Try to relax. It takes repetition. And so, this is what we call physical yielding. Now, when we start to do this, we start to expand our awareness of what's happening inside of ourselves. Now, because this awareness is more in tune with all of these little subtle things that are going on in our own bodies, it also starts to notice all of these subtle things happening in other people. And this is where we move into mental yielding. So, say, for example, I say something to you that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from the start. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention and pretty soon I'm so far off track you want to knock me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is very powerful. And, one, you're just being more considerate to those around you, and so you're going to be more enjoyable to be around. But also, you can use this strategically in relationships, in work, in sales, in negotiations. I mean, so many different ways. You look back and you ever study any old novels on military strategy, and look at all the times that they used yielding in conflict. And so there's lots of different ways that we can apply this to get a desired outcome. And then thirdly, we have emotional yielding. Emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with our own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path and we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But because of our meditative practice, if we could have noticed that before it gained too much momentum down any one way, it could have given us a better perspective to maybe make a different choice and choose a more positive outcome. And so, I've been explaining yielding to people for years. I've been running my academy for 30 years, and every time I do, almost, I'll hear people, oh, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, I do a lot of that all the time. And while I agree, I think everybody does this to some degree all the time. It's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, he would see things about the series of events and the timeline and everything that happened that I know at least I would have no clue of. And so I don't feel like being really in tune with these strategies and getting this to a high level you can do without a meditative practice. It's kind of like if you have a disciplined fighter come in here to the academy and I'm training them for competition, I can easily get that person, if he's willing to do the work, to 85% of their potential. But to get them to 90%, 95%, 97%, now you're talking about athletes like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, who almost seemed a little bit magical, right? And so to get to this level of awareness in our own personal awareness and in the awareness of other people, I truly don't believe you can get to that 95, 97% without some kind of a meditative practice to help expand that awareness and to find a little deeper connection to the energetic principles that are coming through our body language, through our tone of voice, through our facial expressions, through our breath, even, and our just overall energetic state. It's hard to pick up on these without having this in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, you used a proverb in the book that I use all the time with, with clients as well, which is you should meditate for 20 minutes a day, and if you don't have enough time, then you should meditate for an hour.
Yeah.
And I love that one. It's such a good lesson for people. It's like it sort of clicks in a different way. we have the time to do this because or we can definitely make the time or commit the time, and it's about, are we willing to relate, to spend some time relating to ourselves? Are we it's like if we have a romantic partnership, if we're in a relationship with somebody, we are willing to make the time to spend that with them. But the relationship that we have with ourselves is the longest ongoing relationship, in some ways, in many ways the most important relationship. And how often are we willing to commit some time to taking care of that relationship through a meditation practice, through a, slowing down, a looking inward? So I'm still wanting to know more about yielding. What how do you describe the sort of mental posture that one has in like a, you said that there's three kinds of yielding: a physical yielding, a mental yielding, an emotional yielding. The emotional yielding, for example, you use this, if a high level martial artist walks into the gym, or some of your other students have said that they do this from time to time. It kind of reminds me of empathy. We all have the capacity for empathy, but how practiced you are as an empathic listener to others, that's a different story. And it is a skill that takes some time and effort to be built up, so that you can sit with empathic awareness the same way that maybe a therapist does in facilitating a space for somebody else. Even as a coach, or as a sensei of your organization, when you're leading other people and you're leading the room, there needs to be an empathic, open awareness of some sort to everyone, so that you can, you can be aware of when things are kind of like off for certain students, or maybe you notice that this student is hurt, or this student isn't really gaining the technique exactly how you were meaning to teach it. And unless you have an open awareness to kind of see everybody at the same time, then you're not able to. What would can you describe more, like, is there a is do you have any kind of like an exercise that would help facilitate us having the mental understanding of what yielding would maybe feel like, or the posture of what that would be like?
I think any meditative practice, whether it be a movement practice, a breathing exercise, a still meditation, a walking meditation, all of these things help us to be more in tune with, in Qigong, we talk about the five regulations: regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, regulating the spirit. And all of these are so important to find that connection, and oftentimes we are so distracted in our day-to-day lives. You go out and you're bombarded with 1,000 different things coming in, and a lot of times we don't want people to see how we're feeling about certain things, and so I feel like a lot of times most people are walking around with a mask on their face because they don't want to offend somebody, or they don't want to let somebody know how they truly feel. And every time we're getting used to this wall, or this sense of being closed in our everyday lives, sometimes we're like this so often that when you look at yourself in the mirror, you're still wearing that mask. And with the meditative practice, it teaches you how to let go of that mask and really look at what's in your heart and what's in your soul, and reconnect with who you are. And so when you're in that situation, like that group dynamic or whatever it is, where you're trying to understand how to connect with people or a person, this practice helps us be more present, helps us set down any distractions that are coming our way, and learn how to make minor adjustments before things get out of hand. and before things get too far off track. And that's what's so valuable, because if you come to me and you're angry at me, and I can lead the direction and have you leaving the room laughing, how powerful is that versus you coming to the room and me just forcing my way and saying, "No, that's the way it's going to be. See you later." It's so much more powerful, and that's what the meditative arts helps us do. It helps us see things from a bigger perspective, which gives us a more positive outcome in just about any kind of scenario you could think of.
So it gives us sort of an awareness to be able to pause and look outside of ourselves, outside the bigger picture of the situation, and adjust accordingly as we are maybe more open to awareness of how another person's emotional affect might be, their temperament, their mindset, their kind of thoughts, their physical presentation in the space. And so by having this broader awareness and ability to make those pauses and see the things happen and make those adjustments, then we are, in your philosophy, we are living a more optimized experience. Is that correct?
Yes, and you think about, so many times you're having a conversation with somebody, and I see this all the time, and you can't even finish what you're trying to say, and they're trying to answer the question with what they want you to see. And if you don't take the time to really take in and observe and be present and pay attention to the body language and the energetic expression and the tone of voice, and really be into what energy is coming your way, it's really difficult to respond with any kind of educated response, let alone a response that's going to lead it in a positive direction that you want to see and make both people happy, right? And so, this ability to have that sense of awareness and that connection is, you know, kind of magical. It's really cool to meet people when you're having a conversation with them and they're truly present. They're not looking at their phone. They're not thinking about three things they got to do after you're done speaking to them, and that alone right there is, a life lesson worth taking home.
Yeah, it is the value that one gets when they're in a therapeutic space with somebody that gives them. Carl Rogers called that an unconditional positive regard for that other person, that they are truly present and listening. It's so obvious that we, like, collectively are lacking a lot of consciousness, lacking a lot of awareness of how we are affecting others and how we are choosing to move and navigate through the world, because we are not, spending time turning inward, and that we are not seeing each other, like truly seeing each other or truly listening to each other, because, like you said, we're waiting to respond with what we want to say rather than actually receiving what is being said, in order to like in order to maintain a true connection, and to get to that, like, Michael Jordan levels of social being in the world through this yielding, is incredibly healing to other people, incredibly, the sort of emotional response that somebody would get from you. If I go into your dojo angry with you, and I walk out laughing, the kind of healing that I experience from walking out and seeing that shift happen, just having been in your presence and been around you, so extraordinarily healing. Do you find yourself, kind of, therapeutically healing a lot of your martial arts students, or is just being in the practice and working in the martial arts, how therapeutic is that for them?
You know, I've seen the meditative arts change people's lives hundreds of times over. And it's this interaction that we're talking about being so important. But another little direction I'd like to point out, just so people can see this and be aware of it, is while it's very influential and positive in our interactions with other people, the same interaction is going on within ourselves. And I see so many people, they get caught up not really being honest with themselves, not really looking internally into how they feel, how they're holding themselves. You know, that's why when, I mentioned the five regulations, regulating the body, the breath, the mind, the energy, the spirit, if you're not connecting with that on a daily basis and, doing your 20 minutes a day at minimum, how are you ever going to be true to yourself and really be able to give yourself the best of who you are? It's like you got to be able to take a step back and get away from your phone and get away from distractions for at least 20 minutes a day. It's just so important.
Absolutely. Otherwise you're going into the world with an empty tank. You have no fuel because you've spent it on your distractions and you've spent it on it. It's like you're waking up to start your day, and maybe those five areas you're not filling the cups of those five areas so that you can perform optimally in the world. Again, those five areas are.
So regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit.
What would you say is regulating the spirit? What is that?
So, so that's a very
What does that have
deep,
to do with?
esoteric conversation.
Right.
However, they're all connected. So, we always start from the beginning with regulating the body. It's the easiest one to do. You think about if you're sitting down at your computer for 4 hours and you're hunched over, your energetic state is poor. You're going to be feeling sore across the neck and shoulders. But if somebody walks in the door who's like Michael Jordan and you perk up and you're on top of the world, think about how your state changes. So this is something that anybody can do with a little bit of discipline and a little bit of focus, is change their physiology. We do this with our practice, our sitting meditation, our standing meditation, our movement exercises that we're doing. Regulating the breath, again, this is a very difficult thing to do, and it's something where you can get benefits from day one by learning some breathing techniques and exercises. But the whole science of Qigong is geared around different breathing strategies, and there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. And you want to learn how to utilize the breath to get these different outcomes. And you can't utilize the breath effectively if you don't have the body in correct posture and a correct energetic state. So they're very closely connected. Then we have regulating the mind. And again, this is very difficult. It's hard not to let ourselves get distracted and get caught up with these negative emotions and things that are happening all the time. And it takes a lot of consistent effort and practice to learn how to control the mind and be disciplined enough to guide that. And so, if you can regulate the body, regulate the breath, and regulate the mind, then it's easy to regulate the energy because you have those three tools. It's easy to circulate that. Regulating the spirit is like the highest level of Qigong, and one I can't speak on very well because I haven't obtained that level and I've never met anybody in my career that has. I believe that when you can regulate the spirit, it would be somebody who is enlightened. And, again, I've been around meditation teachers and practitioners my entire life and traveled the world seeking out the best teachers I could find. And I've never once met anybody who I would consider as enlightened. And so I really can't speak on that from an educated point of view. However, it has that uh, that kind of mystical sense to it.
Yeah, this field I'm involved in is transpersonal psychology. So the audience generally, not everyone, but a significant piece of the audience is going to be really familiar with the esoteric sort of conversations. We have a lot of different esoteric conversations on the podcast. The reason I ask that is because it's so challenging to describe. It is an intangible aspect. The most, when you're going through those five areas, I'm thinking you're going from the most obvious to the least obvious, the most exoteric to the most esoteric, and so the physical investments. I can work out, I can do these physical movements, I can practice a physical movement sequence that is mindful, and I'm paying attention to all the aspects and the qualities. I really love a labyrinth. I love walking a labyrinth, and you can be very mindful in walking the labyrinth, and maybe in some similar way as a qigong sequence. I can be mindful of every little aspect of a movement, of my of all the different areas of my body moving, just like you were mentioning, like the picking up a glass to drink a glass of water. Maybe you're not going to hit it the same every time, but even trying to. Right now, I'm reminded of bowling. Also, like you're trying to hit that same rhythm in bowling, but you don't always hit that strike. That's more obvious. A mental practice can be oriented around deeper mindfulness exercises. An emotional practice, an energetic practice. I like the example of if Michael Jordan walks into the room, you're gonna perk up, and if you could learn how to how to be in such a way that Michael Jordan is always in the room, if that's what calls to you, if that's the one that lights you up, if you could be in such a way that Michael Jordan is there, maybe that would have some beneficial energetic effects on the way that you're operating in the world. Now the spiritual regulation and the spiritual, I think of the spiritual as connective to others, to each other. Spirit is in and through and around all of us, and so when I think of an ability to spiritually regulate, that seems that it is seated in all of those other aspects. So if I am collectively doing well in those other areas, energetically, emotionally, mentally, physically, then I am also capitalizing on my spiritual regulation as well. I'm staying consistent and focused on being in alignment in those ways. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and I think like a simple example would be, a lot of there's kind of a mantra that we use in Qigong often. It's raise the spirit and sink the Qi. And a lot of times when our spirit gets aroused and through the day and you get excited, our Qi, our bodies get excited too, and so our Qi rises. When this happens, we're getting tight, and that cuts down the efficiency of our energetic circulation and the ability to get to a deeper level of connection with our spirit. When we can learn how to get excited and sink the chi and stay rooted and let the tension fade and stay relaxed, this is kind of an example of what it means to be more connected to the spirit through the meditative practice.
Yeah. It reminds me of in your book. It reminds me of in your book speaking about the enjoyment of the task at hand. Like can I do you believe that somebody could have more agency around their joy for the thing that they are involved in doing, even if it's like basic chores that maybe they don't necessarily want to be doing generally, but could they have a facilitated response and intention to enjoy this, and that being sort of a regulation of their energetic expression, so that they are more involved. Maybe that in some way is a spiritual regulation as well.
I think could definitely be linked to a physical regulation, a mental regulation. You could link the breath to it, an energetic
Hmm.
expression, uh, and then all of those tie into to the spirit.
Hmm.
However, when while all of these things I do believe affect our spirit in how it evolves and how it drives us to wake up the next morning and how we're going to be our energetic expression will be during the day. I think there's a close link to that. When I th- when I think about regulating the spirit from a meditative perspective, I think at a deeper level, it's being able to step out of the matrix, if you will, or step out of reality and get into that place where everything is possible. And that's why I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, I think that the only way that you can truly say that you're regulating the spirit is if you're enlightened. It's very difficult to do. I've known people that have spent their entire life meditating and haven't reached this goal. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe there has been people in the past, or maybe there might be a handful of people on the planet now that are there that just are not known. But I think if they were known, they probably are are not, they don't have their third eye open. I feel like to do that you kind of got to step away from society. I feel like in today's society with everything going on that it would be really difficult to get to this level of cultivation.
Are you saying that if there was an enlightened person, that they would have like a deeper impact on the status quo and the way that we see how things are right now?
I just think if there was an enlightened person, it would be very difficult for them to be in the city around other people. It would be very
Oh,
difficult for
absolutely.
they would need to, be living by themselves up in the mountains somewhere. And because the minute they start getting bombarded with the negativity and distractions and everything that's coming up, it's going to start building that wall and breaking down that connection again. And which is why I feel like in today's society it's so difficult to reach that level of spiritual cultivation.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and I could definitely see that there is a lot of challenges if you're fully and consistently outside of this matrix, or it's an egoic matrix. If that's an ongoing experience, you're outside of that. It would be tough to live in our modern society networks of cities and things like this, and kind of being you have to be outside the grid in some way because you're so pushed and pulled in different directions. But I think that I think that it's possible. There's a lot of really interesting studies on this concept, but when you're speaking about the spiritual regulation, it also made me think again. The field that I'm in is called transpersonal psychology, and so that transpersonal aspect of it, it's the transcendence of persona or ego. It's the taking off the mask. It's all of those things. This is why meditation is so in alignment, and this is a part of why your work in the yielding warrior, this is why it resonates with me. The yielding aspect and the pragmatic of that word of warrior, of its activism, its impact and action and movement and applicability in the world and one's own well-being and the way that they are, just able to be effective in the world. So the idea of the transpersonal and that spiritual regulation is maybe you can dip into it, but how often are we so lost in our egoic matrix that we forget to do 20 minutes of meditation a day, and
Right.
really on that day we probably needed the hour. It's really fascinating how we can be so lost in our own egoic constructs, and get away from really deep, fulfilling work in a committed relationship with ourselves, and practices like this, and your work. So this is really beautiful.
Well, thank you. It's always interesting to talk to other people and get their perspectives as well. I've already learned a lot from listening to you as well. So thank you.
Well, no, I learned an incredible amount with you, and I like the different ways that you have broken down yielding, and broken down the investments, the regulations, the meditation, these different qualities. I think it is important that we can be distinct about the different ways of being in those investments, in those regulations, in those practices, and applying those to our real life. So in the description below, I will have a link to your book, The Yielding Warrior. You get a free book to The Yielding Warrior, and you can join the online The Yielding Warrior program. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the program? What makes it different from other meditation programs?
Yes. So first, if you want to see a copy of the book, you just go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book. Pretty easy to remember. Uh, the thing that separates the program, I think, mostly from, you could go on to YouTube and get lost with following this meditation and this qigong set or whatever. This program teaches you how to start from the root of a meditative practice and build an evolving life practice in any one of the directions of meditation that you want to follow. And it teaches you about, different ways to regulate the body that, one thing, somebody might really enjoy a Tai Chi form, but that might not be for you, right? So what are some other things you can do to focus on that element of the practice? It goes very deep into Qigong and the different ways that we can use the breath and study Kan and Li, of the fire and water, and understand how to use the breath as a strategy to get different outcomes in our physiology, our mental and emotional well-being. It talks about different philosophical approaches and different ways that we can use the uh, the sayings, the mantras, the different ways to get different energetic expressions in what we're doing, and it really kind of just builds a holistic, evolving practice around the things that you're looking to do. Because a lot of times people that get started on a meditation program, they'll do it, and while it may be a good practice in and of itself, it's very limited and they don't even understand what they're doing with the practice, and so without having a good foundation and understanding the roots behind the practices that you're doing, you're never going to see all of the benefits as if you were to start from a good solid foundation, understand why we're doing this versus that, and start putting a package together of ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices that are driving you towards what you're looking to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the program right now. So I just started with the program, and the audiobook has been awesome. And just a great opportunity for people to develop and integrate and transform and apply these concepts to their lives in understanding the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the breath work. All of this it's such a great opportunity to have it housed in this one place, in this structured format, so that you're not lost in the sauce. It's so easy to be lost in the spiritual woo woo sauce. I love how practical it is to apply these concepts to our lives. So thank you so much, Jeff. I've really appreciated this conversation. It's really been an honor.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Likewise.
Yeah, thank you.
You're thinking, who is this man talking?